Welcome to this presentation. We're going to go through the nuts and bolts of how to make a memorandum according to the style manual we're using in this course, and I'll be referring to various resources. Be sure that you've already looked at the formatting with MS Word lecture before you get to this one, because you may be a little bit lost. I'm assuming that you've already developed that information. So I'm going to open up my desktop so that you can see what I have here, and we can go from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into Module 3. So I'm going to go to Learning Modules. And I'm going to go down to Module 3. And we have several resources here that are going to help us make sense of some of these things. First thing I'm going to do is Basics of Legal Writing Assigned Reading. So here we have some material that it kind of introduces you to some legal writing ideas. We're not going to directly talk about this during this class, but this is material that you can be tested over. So it goes over some theory about how we ought to look at legal writing, the things that we ought to think about. So since this was our first this true legal writing project, I wanted to present this information in a framework. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to repeat the information that we have in here again and again. Of course, if you have a question about it, feel free to email me or come to my office hours and we'll talk about the ideas that are existing here. Let me see if there's anything that immediately pops out that you might need to have a little bit of a discussion about. We'll be talking about some of these topics when we're talking about the grammar aspects. I don't see anything particular significance here, but if you have questions about it, not sure what I meant here or how to apply that, don't hesitate to send me an email or send me or come to office hours and we can spend some time talking about that. We're going to go to the next item in our list, and that is the OWL Online Writing Lab. This is done by Purdue University, and it's a very well-regarded website for legal writing, not legal writing, just good writing. And you'll find that generally legal writing is just good writing with a few extra things included. So if you are writing effectively in the English language, it's a very easy step to get to good legal writing. The hard thing to do is to become a good writer. Adding the legal aspects is a relatively easy jump from that point of view. So when you're in your English 1301 course, and you may be thinking, well, I'm not going to write papers about Herman Melville, so this isn't that useful for me. If you can write effectively about Billy Budd or Moby Dick, you can translate those skills into legal writing pretty seamlessly. There'll be some things that you'll learn, but for the most part, if you're an effective writer, you can be an effective writer in a legal context or in a different context. So here we are. We're going to talk about formats for memos. And you can see here that under OWL there are 4 different items, and we're looking at audience and purpose first. One thing to think about when you're writing a memorandum is, what are you attempting to accomplish? Are you going to communicate information, or are you trying to solve a problem? And so you ought to think about, what is my goal at the end of this memo? What do I want the reader to now know that he or she didn't know before, or what do I want to motivate this reader to do as a result? Another thing you have to think about is, who is going to get this memo? And this is probably a bigger issue for us legal professionals than it is for the non-legal professional, because how you choose the audience is going to affect not only if it's an effective way of communicating, but it can also jeopardize the attorney-client privilege. And it could also, if you send it to the wrong person, possibly get you, the non-attorney, in a situation of professional awkwardness because you might be actually appear to be practicing law without a license. So, as a general rule, your audience ought to be only people within the law firm, ideally the attorney. You ought not be sending memoranda directly to clients unless you've gotten approval from the attorney. So as long as you're saying to the attorney, you definitely are not practicing law without a license. And most of the time the information is sent is for that person. Now you can also send memoranda to people within the office about a particular matter. That's also okay. And certainly even though you're working in a legal office, there'll be times where you'll be sending, non-legal topics around. For example, you might be the office manager and it's your job to let everyone know the office is closing at 3 p.m. the day before Christmas. Well, that's not a legal issue. It's just a matter of writing it. You want to make sure you're letting everybody know that the office is closing at 3 p.m. There might even be some clients that need to know that information. And certainly you're not practicing law by letting the clients know, hey, we're closing up at 3 p.m. on Christmas Eve. So think about the audience carefully. If you're not sure who to send the memo to, talk to the attorney and see, number one, what his or her practice would be. Maybe look at examples. There are some attorneys who are more comfortable sending it to more people. There are other attorneys who really just want to be the sole recipient of the document. So it's a useful thing to have that conversation to make sure that you're doing the job the way that it ought to be done. Let's look at the parts of a memo. You'll find in OWL, while there's lots of good information, some of this is not exactly the way that we're going to be doing it in this class. So let's get started. You'll need to have some kind of heading that is the top of the first page of the memo. You're going to want to tell or find out who your memo is to. You're obviously going to want to provide your name, very possibly your title. So this is going to depend in part upon the size of your office. It may, if you only have 3 people in your office, it may be a little silly to say, Cynthia Gruver paralegal, when it's obvious everyone knows that you're the paralegal in the office. On the other hand, if you work in a law firm with 200 attorneys and 75 paralegals, it may be that even though you're sending it to somebody who knows you quite well, this document may be going into some kind of file and it may be read again in 10 years and you've moved on to another position. And so it's probably a good idea that you include your title so that they aren't thinking, oh, well, this Cynthia Gruver, she must be an attorney. So there are definitely times where putting your title in makes sense. Again, it's going to turn upon the formality in the office, the purpose of the memo, and things along those lines. But you're never doing anything wrong by including the job title. Then you want to include the current date. This is the date that you've actually finalized the document and you're sending it off. It's not unusual to spend multiple days on a date, and if you type in the date that you start, but you don't actually finish it for 4 more days, be sure to update the date so it's the date that you actually send it. It's a good idea not to have Microsoft actually put the date in there, because when you reopen the document later on, let's say you mailed it or you emailed it to your colleague on Monday, you reopen it and you decide to send it to somebody else. Well, Microsoft then is going to populate it with a new date. So it's best to just go ahead and type the date that you actually sent it so it won't be constantly updating. And then you want to have the subject of your memorandum. What is it about? It's common to put it in bold or to underline it as well. In a perfect world, you probably have your subject line be only 1 line, but there are times where it makes sense to have more than 1 line in the subject. For example, you might have 1 line devoted to the file name and number so that it's easy for the file clerk, and that file clerk may be you, to make sure that it gets into the right document file. So those are some ways of considering those types of issues. And again, within your law firm may have very specific headings for memoranda. I can remember when I initially was practicing in a large law firm, it was very, very specific. You did not vary from that formatting. And then there are other law firms that are more casual about that. But you'll want to have this information in your document. It may look different, but you'll want to have that same information. Then there'll be an opening segment, and the purpose of this is to say, hey, this is basically explain in more detail what that subject is, why this memorandum is going out. It puts it within a context. It may be because you've been working on this memorandum for several days, it may be obvious to you why you're sending this memorandum out, but the person who's receiving it may not have that full context. And again, your goal is to make it as easy as possible for the reader to jump in and immediately grasp your arguments. Or it may be that this document is being reread 5 years later when it becomes again relevant to a particular case. So your audience may have no particular knowledge about what's going on in the case at that time, so it's useful to at least present somewhat of a point of reference or a framework for it. You can go overboard with that, though. You want your memorandum to be relatively short, but you do want to provide a context. So you want to have a context for it. What are you trying to solve? What is the issue? Then you want to say, well, this is the task that I've been assigned to do. You asked that I look at, or in this memorandum, I'm going to answer these particular questions. It presents a context. Now, when we're talking about interoffice memorandum, I want to pause here and say that we're not talking about writing a legal memorandum. We aren't going to be doing that in this course. You'll probably be doing that in the legal writing course, LGLA 1305. There are specific headings and subheadings that you use with that document that you wouldn't use in this other type of interoffice memorandum, which is not as focused on the legal situation. And then you'll want to close with some kind of closing segment. It's oftentimes a good idea to summarize what your conclusion is and perhaps to present next steps. What's the next thing we need to do? And then you'll indicate the attachments that this memorandum might need. You might have a table showing maybe a calendar. Let's say this is a memorandum that you send out once a year going over the days that the office will be closed, and you might attach that with a list of those days. So that could be a good way of indicating that. On your memorandum, you want to say, hey, there's an attachment. Putting that on that lets someone know, hey, okay, I should have another page here. Let me see if I do. And if they don't have that other page, they know to contact you and say, hey, my copy's missing this other page. I should like to get that. It also reminds the person, hey, look on the next page. I provided all this data for you. So we've talked about the audience and purpose. We've talked about the parts of the memo. Let's look at the format. And this offers some idea about how to break down the content. Your header, the information we say to, from, date, and what the subject is, they're recommending about 1/8 of the memo. Now, of course, the size of the header really isn't going to change. If your memo is 20 pages long, your header is going to be the same size than if it's 1 page long. So I'm not sure that this rule of thumb is that useful. This suggests, of course, a relatively short memo, which is, in most business cases, going to be the way it works out. But in a legal environment where we're paid for words for the most part, sometimes your memorandum might be longer than that. And then you'll once again talk about, hey, this is who I am, this is why I'm sending this to you, this is the job I have with respect to that. You want to definitely devote some of your time for context. And then you'll discuss what your conclusions are, what your analysis is, and that's kind of the meat of the memo. That's where you want to spend most of your time. Again, probably the header and this next section are not going to vary too much in length. But this third section right here is going to vary. It might be relatively short, it might be pages and pages long. And then you'll close. Again, the close isn't going to be variable that much, but this one is the one that's going to be pretty variable. Then we have a sample memo. And this shows the style format that they're suggesting for this particular presentation. Let's look at some neat features about this. One is that they are using headings. Headings are wonderful, wonderful things. Legal documents routinely use headings. There are lots of good things about headings. One is that they break up a document so that they're telling the reader, they're giving the reader a pre-read. Hey, we're about to talk about internet advertising. And so your brain is set up, okay, I'm expecting to see this. And you know that there's some shift between this paragraph and this paragraph. Without that heading, you wouldn't have been prepared for that shift. So headings are very, very good things, very useful in all legal writing, at least in all writing, but certainly in legal writing. Another neat thing about this is that we have lots of bullets here. Bulleting is a very good thing. It does a lot of things for the reader. For one thing, it is a point of interest for the reader. One's eyes are immediately drawn to the bulleted information. It's different than the rest of it. It's usually kind of interesting for our eyes, and so we are drawn to it. So the stuff we bullet, we want to be especially important. If it's not the important stuff, don't bullet it. You want to focus that on make that the important part. If it's not, even though if it's something that might be very bulletable, if that's a word, but something that could be easily bulleted. If it's not important, you don't want to waste a bulleting for that. Another neat thing about bulleting is that it creates a lot of white space. We have all this space over here, but there's no writing. And there's some additional space over here where we don't have writing. Again, that creates visual interest. If this memo is actually being printed out, it also gives the reader an opportunity to make some notes, jot some information down. So it's useful from that perspective. A downside to it, and this usually isn't going to be an issue with Interoffice memorandum, is that it's going to make your document longer. Obviously, if we've just listed right here on this line, Google, comma, Facebook, comma, MySpace, comma, eBay, comma, and iTunes, period, we would have been able to save really all of this space. And so our final memorandum probably would have ended maybe about here, ballpark around here, as opposed to down here. So if space is of a premium, that might motivate you in certain situations to be less excited about bulleting. Okay, so let's look at our form information. Here are the guidelines. Type the document memorandum or Interoffice memorandum. Use the tab key to justify the memo header content. So what you'll do is you'll type 2, then you'll tab, then you will type John Doe, then of course you'll hit return, then you'll do from, tab, May West, etc. Double space between lines in the heading, single space paragraphs, and double space between paragraphs. There should be no signature block on the memo form. Okay, and the note is that some government agencies still adopt, there should be space there, but signing memorandum. But that's not what we're going to do. So let's go through these steps here. And again, I'm going to just play along. I'm going to open up a new document. And so the first thing I'm going to do, I'll go back to my instructions, is I need to title the document memorandum or Interoffice memorandum. Okay, I'm going to center that. I'm going to make it Times New Roman. I'm going to use 14 point. I'm going to make this bold so it pops a little bit. And I'm going to make it all caps as the example indicated. Memorandum. Okay, let's go to our next set of instructions. Okay, now we're going to go to the next tab. So we're going to do 2, tab, and whomever we're writing the memorandum to. I'm going to hit return. I'm going to go to left justify. I'm going to move our font down to 12. And I'm going to turn off the cap mark. I still have it on hold. I'm going to 2. The T is capitalized, the O is lower letter, and I'm going to do the colon. Now I'm going to hit the tab button. I'm going to turn on my formatting so you can see. You can see that little arrow that tells me I hit the tab button. And now I'm going to say I'm sending this memorandum to Margaret Thatcher. Go back to our instructions. Double space between lines in the heading. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to see what do we have set up for the spaces. Okay, I'm going to go to 2. Here, now. I'm now going to go and see my next line should be from, capital F, the rest of the letters lowercase, colon, and I hit tab again. And you can see it's lining up here, right? There's a nice line here. So because 2 is a shorter word, there's going to be more space up here. Now I'm going to say Winston Church. Again, it's still going to be that double spacing. I can always check, but you can see it's still clicked there. Go to the next line. Then our capital D-A-T-E, colon, space. And I'm going to send this out, we'll say May 20th, 1944. So we have a nice left margin right here. Then we have this nice line right here. Let me actually put my ruler up so you can actually see what I'm doing here. So you can see this is really right at a half-inch mark. And as I turn that on, you can see everything lines up nicely. Everything lines up nicely there. Go back to my instructions. And I'm ready to do the subject line. And hit tab. Oh, wait a second. We see a problem here. The word subject actually extends beyond this straight line right here. And you can see right there that my colon is actually in that line. So if I'm going to use the word subject, I'm going to have to do 2 tabs. So what I'm going to do is write. And now again, it's lined up neatly right here. So I'm going to say, our subject is D-Day Invasion. And maybe I'm going to underline this text, or maybe I'm going to put it in bold, because this is the most important thing. This is what I want. I'm Winston Churchill. This is what I want Mrs. Thatcher to see as soon as she opens this document. Oh, that's what the topic of this memorandum is about. If this were a legal topic, let's say it was complaint of ABC company. And then I'm going to make this into 1. Tab it over, and I'm going to say the file number is ABC123 colon ABC company versus DEF company. So this second information, I'm going to actually space like that. The second line is telling the file clerk where to find the file. I might actually say file number. So this helps the file clerk find that information. That one we have it in bold. And then this first line really tells Margaret Thatcher what she needs to know. This is what the topic of this particular document is. Let's go back to our instructions. Double space between lines in the heading, we've done that. Single space paragraphs and double space between paragraphs. So how do we set that up? Well, let's go to the meat of our document. Okay, we want it to be single space, which we have, but we want to add a space after the paragraph. So we have that set up too. Because if I didn't want it, then I would say, don't put it in there. So let's get started. I'm going to say, the D-Day invasion will occur on February 2nd, 2004. It will involve many soldiers. We are hoping for good weather, but fear that there may be rain and wind. If so, we may have to delay the landing for a few days. Okay, now I'm ready to go to the next paragraph. And for some reason I didn't do that. So let me go back here, see how my formatting is. Next space after paragraph. There we go. Many different branches of the armed services will be participating. I'm going to do some bullets here. Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. We know that high casualties are unavoidable. Something along these lines. Okay, so this is going to set up our document so that it is, so you can see here that we have set up each one of our paragraphs. But we haven't done those, we haven't indented. And so what we're going to do at the beginning of each paragraph is we're going to indent. let's say that this sentence is still part of that paragraph. Okay. Please let me know if you need additional information. I am available for a meeting any time in the next during the next 2 weeks. Again, we're gonna. Now, one thing you may have noticed is that between sentences, I have selected 2 spaces. I'm going to remove those extra spaces. I grew up learning to type on a typewriter. And back when I learned how to type, the rule was that you would put 1 space between a word and 2 spaces between one sentence and another sentence. The reason for that had to do with typesetting procedures back then. Most legal writers nowadays prefer to have only 1 space between the period or terminal punctuation and the first letter of the next sentence. It's not wrong to have 2 spaces, but it's preferred to have only 1 space. You can actually set up your computer so that it will only have 1 space under those circumstances. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it one way or the other, but I do want you to be aware of the fact that that is an issue. You will sometimes see that by the name of the person who sent it, especially if it's printed out, he might initial it. Might initial it with a wet signature or wet initials, and then it might be sent out. So you might find a WC written here. What that is saying is, you know, I've read this and I support what this document says. It's almost like a signature on the letter. Not all law firms do that by any means, and they might only do it for certain letters that go out. Let's look at some sample documents. And go to this sample document file. We have Format Guide for Interoffice Memorandum. This is the equivalent for your style manual for this particular assignment. Now, I said before, actually, our style manual is saying we ought to use subject, so I'm going to go back and make that change. So I'm going to have to add an extra tab here so these line up. I need these to line up, and I'm also going to have to add a tab here. And I need these to line up like that, so it's a nice tight thing. You want a top margin of 2 inches. Let's go back and look. And actually, in this document, they're also telling us we need to capitalize these. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to hit this button up here, uppercase, 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 uppercase. And you can see that through my Winston Churchill law fonts. I'm going to retract that. So now we're in good shape with this. We need a side margin of 1 inch, a bottom margin of 1 inch, a top margin of 2 inches. So let's go back and look. The way to do that is we're going to look at page layout. And this might be called something different in your particular document. So we're going to go to margins. I have it currently using normal margins. That's the most common style. It's going to be 1 inch all the way around. But I need to customize. I'm going to go down here to custom margins. And I want a top margin of 2 inches. I'm only going to want this on the first page of the memorandum, but you see the rest of the margins are going to be the same. So we're going to have 2 inches on top, and then the rest of the pages are going to be 1 inch. Now, I actually did for this right here, I'm going to go to home. I actually did a 2. So I'm going to do it for that one. But another way of doing it is to keep it with a 1 space. And then just hit the return twice. Actually, that looks like it's more than one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here and make that look better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that. Okay, and now I'm going to do a space like this. So what I'm doing is I'm mimicking the, as if I had a double space situation, only using one space so I can have that space like that. You can change it. You could do the double space, but it just involves having multiple formats within a document. That can sometimes get confusing. And so ideally, I prefer to single space my documents and then I add the return to them. Looks good. But you can go either way. It's really your call. Okay, and so we have set up the top part of our document. And it might be, let me just make one little change here. It might be that you have more than one person. It might be to Maggie Thatcher and also to Brian Smith. I mean, it could be for more than one person. It could be for Winston Churchill and Dwight D. Eisenhower. So there can be names. In some law firms, it's important how the order that you put the names in. And so you want to follow the etiquette in your law firm. It might be that names should be arranged alphabetically, or it might be a culture that all the partners' names go first and all the associates and paralegals and other such names. So you just want to make sure you're following the etiquette of your particular law firm. Usually in memorandum you'll find that people will tend to use their formal name. For example, Margaret Thatcher actually went by Maggie. And in a conversation, she probably was referred to as Maggie. But probably in a memorandum that is in this formal of a format, you're actually going to type out Margaret Thatcher. And again, something to look for in your law firm. There are some people who never ever use their formal name. But if a person uses their formal name to sign a document, it's probably a good idea to use their formal name when you're setting up a memorandum. So that's a good rule of thumb. See how what their signature block on their letter is to indicate which one should be preferred. Okay, they are in our guidance here. We are not, you can see here there's a format here. They are not saying that we're going to do this intention. So we're going to take that away because we're going to follow our style manual. And you can see here, this is going to give you an example. Now one thing in this example, they don't say memorandum here. For my example, I've included it. But that's optional. You can include memorandum or interoffice memorandum, or you can leave that off. Either way is fine. Okay? You'll see you do need to have that double space between the paragraphs. That's the way we're indicating a paragraph change. And you can see there's some bulleting. And you can see that it concludes with the person's initials. See if they describe that here. And here's an example of a distribution list of more than one person. Reference initials. If someone other than the originator types the memorandum, the keyboard operator's initials should be typed to the bottom. So presumably, probably Winston Churchill wasn't typing his own documents. Let's say his secretary was Harry Green, so it would be HG right there. And that keeps a track record of who's the typist that completed this particular project. If Winston Churchill did type it himself, he's not going to put WC. If there's no initials there, the presumption is that the author typed it himself. And then you would indicate if there's an attachment or enclosure. And then you do include its attachment or enclosure. Again, this is a good rule of thumb to look at. So this gives you some ideas about how to go about presenting your document. Let me actually open up the assignment so you can see what the assignment is for this particular task. So we're going to go into Learning Modules. Module 3. And here's our assignment. You have just sent a letter to the county clerk in Collin County to record the claim of lien for Miriam Rivera, a client of your firm. You want to let me, Cynthia Groover, the responsible attorney, know that the letter has been mailed. There's a typo there. It should be mailed, so add an ED there. Along with a check for $10 in a self-addressed stamped envelope with instructions to return the lien once it is recorded. You also want me, Cynthia Groover, to know that once you get the lien back from the county clerk, you will send it to Ms. Rivera. In formatting your document, use the format guide for Interoffice memoranda that you will find in sample documents. That's that document we're just looking at here. Let's flip over to it. This one right here. So this is our style guide. This tells you what to do. Use the date that you submit your assignment as the date of the memorandum. So be sure if you submit it on August 14th, use August 14th, don't use August 13th or August 15th. And again, a little reminder, I do not accept late assignments. So how ought you to approach this? Well, you'll do the heading. And you may be initially thinking, gosh, I don't know how to phrase all this language here. Well, it's important that you phrase it well. I don't want to diminish that because obviously that's the meat of the memo. But I'm more interested in formatting. So if you get all of the formatting perfect, you capitalize where you're supposed to capitalize, you space where you're supposed to space, and you don't do the best writing the actual content, you're still going to be happy with your grade. If you do really, really well writing the content, but you mess up all the other formatting, it's good content, but it's not formatted right, you're not going to be happy with your grade. So focus your energy on making sure your document looks like this. What I recommend doing in terms of actually writing the content is to cut and paste this in. Now you're going to have to tweak it, obviously. For example, you're going to say, I have just sent a letter to the county clerk in Collin County to report the claim of lien for Miriam Rivera, a client of our firm. And you might say the letter has been mailed along with a check for $10 in a self-addressed stamped envelope with instructions to return lien once it is recorded. I'm not going to do the rest of this, but what I'm trying to point out is it's been 90% drafted for you. Don't overthink this. Just cut and paste the content and change it so the pronouns match and that you're providing the information. Now, one thing you'll see here, you may see this blue line under it has been mailed. You may wonder, why is it blue? It's because this is in, actually I have an extra space, so I'm going to get rid of that. It has been made blue because while it's grammatically correct, it's in the passive voice. It's probably not the best way of writing it. So I'm going to change that a little. When I mailed it, I enclosed a check for $10 in a self-addressed stamped envelope with instructions to return the lien once it is recorded. So I was able to avoid using that passive voice. We will have a whole unit on passive voice. So if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I don't know what passive voice is, I don't know how to identify it, I don't know how to fix it, don't worry too much about that right now. This project is about getting the formatting right. So if you have a passive voice sentence, it's not going to be a major deduction. But one of our projects in this course is to avoid passive voice. So be on the lookout for it. Try to avoid it. If you're not familiar with it, it may be a good idea for you to Google it. The big thing to remember about passive voice is you want the subject of your sentence, in this case I, to be doing the action. I sent. But if you have a sentence that says the letter was mailed, well, the letter isn't mailing anything. A human being had to mail the letter. So look at the subject. Is the subject doing the verb? That tells you you are an active voice. But again, Microsoft Word will tell you that if it's looking for passive voice. And again, you can schedule that by hitting on File, Options, and electing for that to be one of the proofing things that happens. Passive sentences right here. So if you don't already have that turned on, so it's going to check for passive sentences, it's probably a good idea. It'll check, and you can see it's telling me that this is passive voice. And a self-addressed statement with instructions to return the lien once the clerk has recorded it. And we solve that problem. Again, since it's not going blue with me anymore, I know that I'm okay. So hopefully you feel empowered to do this. If you feel some level of uncertainty or insecurity, please come by my office. Most of the time when folks come by my office, we'll sit down together for like 5 minutes and a big light bulb goes off and they say, oh, I get it. And we'll work on it together and we'll actually work on the assignment and I will hold your hand the whole way and we'll get you to a place where your document looks great. I am delighted to do that with you. So don't hesitate. Don't feel self-conscious. Just come on by, and I think you'll end up feeling much more confident, and you'll feel that you're in a better position to complete an assignment that you're proud of. On the other hand, if you've gotten what we needed to say here and you feel like you've mastered it, that's also awesome. And most of the students feel like that they pick up enough from the lecture to feel confident about how they're doing it. But either way, it's great. I look forward to seeing you if that makes sense, and if it doesn't, I look forward to metaphorically seeing you at the next lecture. Thanks for your attention. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my document sharing. Have a good day.